Welcome to GraceStory Podcast. We're here to connect you with education, resources, and community that equip you for the journey of restoration. My name's Nate Davison, and I am your host here at GraceStory Podcast. Thank you for joining us on this episode. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, there on that app, give us a follow, tap a 5-star rating, and drop a review. If you're listening on Spotify, give us a follow there and hit the notification bell to never miss an episode. On this episode of GraceStory Podcast, we have a couple guests with us that are no stranger to the show. It's Ryan Waters and Amber Jones. Guys, welcome to GraceStory Podcast.
Hey.
Great to be here.
And we are in several different spots. In fact, if you're watching on YouTube, which if you're listening in and you want to watch, head on over to YouTube. GraceStory Ministries is the channel. Ryan, where are you at exactly?
I am in the middle of nowhere, Michigan. A little town called Mears. It's actually not far from Silver Lake, where the dunes are. So we are camping. So I'm in this little secluded spot on our campground and coming to you live.
Nothing but dedication is what I hear right there. On this episode, we're wanting to walk through some changes for GraceStory, some things that are happening in 2025, a little shift, and so we wanted you to hear it from us. And so I'll throw it over to Amber to start with, because change is hard, change is scary, and when you don't know what's going on, it could be even scarier. So Amber, what if you were going to just throw this off? How would you start that with the changes coming to GraceStory in 2025?
Yeah, this question reminds me of a story my mother-in-law shares about when she was taught to swim, and that involved something along the lines of being thrown off of a dock. And so I think there's a little bit of this diving in that we're doing at the top of this conversation and the care that we'll do along with it as well. But I think it won't come as any surprise to our GraceStory community if you've been at a conference, if you've listened in on the podcast, if you've been a part of our community groups, that there's been some whispers, some rumbling that there's some change coming. And we have, as a team, we've really been trying to take a look over the past few months of this summer at how we can serve better, how we as a staff and volunteer leadership team can do a better job of keeping ourselves from burnout as well as we lead from the front. So that's what we're headed into, is a season where we get to do some intentional restructuring of the internal organization that we have in place. We're going to move from a working board, which we've had established as kind of our approach to GraceStory, is our board are the ones doing the work, leading, and we're going to move that to an advisory board. Many of our board members are going to stay the same. We're going to be bringing in some mentors and some professionals in the field that are also going to help us as they join the team. That's really exciting for us. And so we're going to be moving that part of the structure. As well, we're going to grow our staff. So if you have any interest in being a part of the team here at GraceStory, reach out, GraceStory Ministries at gmail.com. We are looking for some people who are dedicated to this community, to the mission of GraceStory of providing accessible, biblically based mental health resources and inspiring hope. And so we're going to do that, as well as take a little time to intentionally be able to meet our audience and our community where you are, and bring a little bit of GraceStory on tour, so to speak, where we can listen to what are your everyday needs. As we're making some pivots and some transitions, we want to hear from you. And we've started that conversation in the GraceStory community through some polls that we've put out to hear from you. What do you feel your greatest needs are? We've listened to that. And so what that looks like is, for right now, we're going to be putting a little bit of a pause on the full production 2025 conferences, the men's and women's conference for that, as we take that energy and shift that into building that infrastructure, building out an opportunity to get with you guys where you are in some of our main local regions that you've been coming from. And so that's just a little taste, at least.
Yeah, and we're going to break down some of this a little bit more as we talk here in the next 30 minutes or so. But Ryan, a question for you I want to throw over to you. In full GraceStory garb, I see as well, representing there in Michigan with the kids running in the background. I love it. What role do you see kind of the rest and renewal playing in the future direction of GraceStory here with this, as Amber put it, kind of a pause?
Yeah, well, as Amber alluded to already, it's pretty critical that we model what we're trying to preach here, which is sustainability. And we as an organization need to model that from the top down. And so creating a system that works not just for 2 days, or 4 days a year at the two conferences, but works throughout the remainder of the year as well. And so what we're doing, even though we understand that it's going to create some challenges, I think at the end of the day models what we're really trying to preach as an organization, which is finding a system that is, yes, mission-oriented, but also sustainable and allows us to continue to function at the desired level that we each want to be able to continue to contribute for the long term. So GraceStory is really not interested in just being a flash in the pan. We want to be here for you, but also for your kids and grandkids down the road. And so we think that creating this shift now is going to position us well to be able to do that.
And Amber, building on that flash in the pan metaphor that Ryan's brought up here, what might you say to those that it may view this as, well, I knew it, my one thing that I had going on good in this life, GraceStory, is going away. They're not here anymore. Or heaven forbid, there's those that may be out there celebrating, finally, GraceStory, never liked them anyways, they're going away. I don't know why there would be those that feel that way, but there may be some. What would you say to maybe those that think, well, this is finally the end of the road for GraceStory. A pause is not forward momentum. They're going away, as MacArthur said, just fading away. What would you say to those people as they hear this?
Yeah, I love the example that our new communications manager, Lisa Cornegas, gave about the dahlia. And the dahlia has this system to growing that God instilled in it where it can bloom and then it's almost like it closes up again and then it blooms bigger. And it's almost like in that closing in, it's able to gather that strength to move forward and push forward into the new season, the new stage of blossoming. And I just see a little bit of that same idea with what GraceStory is doing here. And as a team, we've talked through how do we best care for those people, because we know that there are so many people who have made GraceStory a part of their rhythm. And we talked about that in the last couple episodes where I touched on the rhythms and habits that we have in place to be able to dig deep into the resilience that God is bringing in and asking of us and empowering us to do. GraceStory has been part of people's rhythms, and we understand that. And so while at first blush, this could feel like, oh, goodness, I just feel like I understand. We talked about both, and I understand why they're doing this. And somehow this hits me as betrayal or abandonment. And it's just one more time where I'm feeling disappointed by people who said they'd never give up on me. And I want you as a listener and as our friends to really understand that we know that. We feel that. This has been a part of my own family for just Vivian, our youngest, was 4 when we started GraceStory Conference. And so it's the rhythm of our family. We build out our homeschool year around 1 and 2 conferences a year and when we start and when our breaks are. So we've had the summer to talk about that. So we understand you're going to need some time. As a family, we've been able to think through some of what that looks like. What is kind of built into the excitement? to shed tears and have those quiet times on the porch where we wonder, is it all or nothing? Is Grace Story over? Was this just a good run? And guys, I'm really excited though, because as you're able to work through some of the both grief and hopefulness of what's coming, it's just so exciting to think about. This is giving us, so our team has been just in that trench, churning out conference after conference. And we love being able to see you in person 2 days every year. What we're looking at, though, is going to allow a few more people to come in and help carry the leadership load of setting that strategy, connecting with key influencers, ministry leaders who can help us spread the word. And in the meantime, that's going to allow Nate, Ryan, and I a little bit more breathing room to be able to connect to you outside of the walls of conference. And I know that that's something I've heard year in, year out. We need something more. We need something 365, not just the 2 days a year. That's what we have said, you know what, in order to be able to do what the community is asking, we're just going to have to put a pause so that we can have time and energy to shift into this new thing.
Yeah, that's a really good dive into the decision to actually pause men and women's Grace Story conferences for 2025. If there's something, though, as you were as a part of the Grace Story community, you're listening in and you have a specific question or anything like that, send it over to Nate at GraceStoryMinistries.com. I'll make sure that gets to the rest of the group here, and we'll look at those questions because, again, we want to hear from you. Ryan, as you're hearing all this, and Amber talked about it a little bit, the excitement and also the sadness that may come with this, how do you balance some of that excitement and sadness when making these significant changes like this?
Yeah, well, Amber used the term both and that really does encapsulate kind of how I feel about it. And maybe I'll use the word grief as well. Grief is only, around something negative, like the death of a loved one or something along those lines. But really, grief happens anytime there's a transition and something we had enjoyed or hoped for or longed for changes. And so it's okay for there to be grief that comes up around this, even if intellectually you understand that this is really just positioning us for a more sustainable, even better long-term outcome. There's still, because there's transition. So it's okay to feel those feelings of sadness and confusion and disillusionment. And I would encourage you not to avoid those. I mean, that's the one thing that actually can prolong grief, is when we try to avoid it. So find places as well, people that you can share that with as well. That's another thing that really helps people move through grief, is when you bring it into the light in those safe places. Mm-hmm. So don't avoid it, don't run away from it, and find safe places where you can bring it. And we hope that even though this involves Grace Story, that Grace Story can still be one of those places where you bring those feelings of sadness to as well. Like Nate said, share it with us. We want to hear it, because and we'll talk about this even more, but one of the things we really hope for in this transition is to create more space to hear even more directly and acutely from each of you.
Yeah, it's not a shotgun spray and pray approach that Grace Story wants to have to the needs of the Grace Story community. Before we talk kind of about the community and some engagement there, Amber, as the president and founder of Grace Story and kind of, the vision caster leader here, what are some of those challenges you anticipate as you restructure the internal organization of Grace Story, setting it up for future success?
Yeah, I think part of it is just as we set some of those new teams and set up new leaders, there's always just making sure we have the right person for the right job and putting people within their giftings, finding the people that work well within the culture of Grace Story. Those are all things that are really important to us. And the exciting part is God is bringing those people to us, and And it's fun because some of these are names that I've seen in passing, I kind of know of, but as I've had opportunity to have conversation with them, present this and see if this would be a ministry they'd like to couple with, goodness, it's like you just start realizing how big the body of Christ is and how big God's vision is for restoring families and his children. This is not just constrained to our finite view of what's wrong with the world, right? It's not constrained to the people we know. God is bringing those people just to have a place in what we're doing next. So that's exciting. And then I think we're going to go into this, but I also want to make sure people understand we are completing Women's Conference 2024. So if you're like, oh goodness, I can't even handle this, it's so much devastation. I want to make sure to insert a little bit of hope right here. Make sure you understand. Come and join us for Women's Conference 2024 in Cleves. We are still going to be completing out the 2024 program.
Yeah, and that's one of the ways to keep those relationships, the community together and connected during that time. And I think I'd ask Ryan here during this moment of transition, how important is it from your perspective to maintain that connection with the GraceStory community during the transition?
I'd say it's hard to overestimate the importance of it. And one of the things we're going to be doing is increasing more opportunities for that connection to happen. We already have the social media groups. We're also introducing the GraceStory app, which we hope to utilize even more fully in that connection-making opportunity. We have some coffee shop dates that are going to be coming up that we're going to have more intimate, low-key, but accessible way for people to maintain connection. So, as I mentioned with grief, it's important that grief happen within community rather than isolation. But I think beyond just the sharing of the sadness of this transition, even if we know it's a good thing, it's also important to kind of enter into the hope of what is coming and those deeper opportunities for connection that are just around the corner.
Amber, with those more intimate settings throughout 2025, can you tell us kind of your vision about those smaller, more intimate discussions you plan to have with the community around the 2025 year? Yeah,
this is the part I'm most excited about. We have had in the past what we called coffee dates, where when Miranda was on board, she and I went to a few of those. Mom and I have been a part of that. My mom, Nate Davison. And we would just make ourselves available, and some of the ladies would meet up, and we would just visit over coffee. What we're doing at this point is expanding that. So that's going to be for men and women moving forward, where more members of the team are able to come together. Those are going to be published ahead of time so that there's really an opportunity for you to be able to get them on your calendar. And while we are not going to grandfather in a lot of predetermined activities, because we do have that new board of advisors coming in, we want them to be able to really set strategy and dream for GraceStory over the next 12 to 18 months and be able to have the freedom and flexibility without a lot of things already scheduled out for them. But this is one place that we plan as a team to try to hit some of our local regions like Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and we have a good number of people who come from Florida. So that'll be fun to have a coffee, GraceStory on tour opportunity in Florida. We'll have to probably make sure that's in January or February for all of us northern folk. But what the plan is, and this is the part that I think will serve you as the listener and as the community member really, really well, is that we would come into a coffee shop and have that space reserved just for us and allow you to have a more cost-effective way to introduce your friends, your family, coworkers, church members to the Grace Story experience. We would have that taste of conference where we have Nate doing kind of what he does on Side Stage of leading a panel, and Ryan or myself, maybe another storyteller or instructor like Kathy Sprinkle, someone else who's also speaking into that and having these focused topics of conversation. We've got an incredible communications team that God has been building out over this summer, just really bringing people into that. We're going to have more purpose-driven topical conversation. And that's going to be reflected in the blogs that are being put out through our website, the app resources that will be delivered right to your phone as that launches. So stay tuned for that. Emails from me personally, where I'm staying in contact with you that way and reminding you of the things that are coming up and making sure that you're staying attuned to the different resource offerings that we have. But then on that evening, then maybe we've got 40 to 60 people who are on location, and you can hear that conversation. It's still quickly targeted. So it goes past just how's the weather and where are your kids in school. But because we're focusing in on those conversations on purpose, then it also targets that conversation you have with one another. And that's what happens during that coffee time out in the atrium at conference. Following that, we want to turn that on you guys, and you guys get to be the panel, and we listen, and we want to find out in new ways over the next 12 to 18 months, what are you experiencing in real time? What are you facing in your lives? And what are the issues that are coming up for you? And when you're working with marriage and kids and relationships at work and just anxiety about we're coming into an election. What are those things that you're facing? And we want to listen to you and take that back to that communications team, who then gets to find the resources for real-time tools of what you're experiencing in your lives.
So a lot of that is a good synopsis of what you're envisioning with increased involvement with the community, kind of beyond the walls of conference. Let's shift it just a little bit and talk about what maybe your vision is for increased involvement from the community. What you mentioned already, hearing from them. Is there more that you're envisioning from the community of Grace Story in the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, and there is. And this is where I want to really be able to voice my expectations clearly, because, guys, many of you have been strongly involved and gleaned from the value of Grace Story Conference over the last few years. You have been such avid cheerleaders of what we've done, and you have felt the impact of change for your own families and your own lives, and I've heard those stories over and over. It gives me goosebumps. You guys have been changing family legacy for yourselves and your families, and I'm so proud of you. And there comes a point where we have this opportunity then to give back. And really, Grace Story cannot grow. We cannot serve more families without you getting on board. So as we create these opportunities, like bringing and creating that space, our mission statement, inspiring hope by creating sacred space where healing happens, you get to be a part of that. So I know not everybody can give a few hours each week to be an ongoing Grace Story team member, but we're all on a team here. And when it comes to these appointments and these spaces where we get to expand this Grace Story experience, we invite you to bring your friends, to share with people, to, if you would like to be a part of organizing and helping volunteer at that local event, we're going to need people in the different regions that we're going to that are willing to take some aspects of those responsibilities and share the word and go to local churches and counselors and share that as well. So that's one way. Another is for sure always the prayer support, lifting our team up, inviting God into the equation with discernment, and praying for your fellow community members that are going to be experiencing this with you. We're going to make that space available for conversation in community groups and kind of have some guided questions for that over the next few months. And then if God has really gifted you with the financial resources, we are trying to be the best stewards of every dollar that you give. And one of the places that we looked was, if we're serving this many people with this amount of money 2 days a year, what could we do if we take those same God-supplied resources and bring this to people where they live? And so we're going to continue to need your financial support as well.
Yeah, and if you want to jump on board with that, there's plenty, I believe, that are looking for ways. They have the monies, they're going to put it somewhere. Where are they going to put it? And I'm sure Amber would love to have a conversation about coming alongside GraceStory and joining the team in that way. With you already said it, GraceStory Abundance Conference 2024 is all a go, full stops. And I'd throw this to you, Amber. Is this a farewell tour? Are we gonna, see the best of at conference? And are we sponsored by Kleenex this year at GraceStory Women's Conference?
Well, I think it would be ignorant of us to not say that there will be an awareness that it's the final one before a pause. However, we're not, that isn't our focus, because we're coming together. The theme says it all, and that was already in place before this, but about the abundance, the abundant goodness of God, even through transition and even through uncertainty. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. We have an incredible lineup. I love that this was an unintended throwback lineup. We've got Sarah Fry and Mandy Buckland, who were some of our first instructors year one in 2019. They will be back. We have Dr. Tiffany Yecki Brooks, who has been on the podcast before, has been highlighted in the community as well with Gaslighted by God. That is going to be an incredible session. Jessica Cravens will be back with worship. Out of the Dust will be sharing their story. Friday evening, we are getting in the post bash. So you guys have talked about how the guys get a pre-bash and you want to play and have fun together and fellowship as well. So we're bringing that. And so it'll just be 2 days of really playing, having fun, learning together, digging deep, and positioning for the next year of pause, but in the next year of really leaning into serving one another as well.
And Ryan, I know it's a women's conference, but it's one you go to every year. What are you most excited about for women's conference this year, GraceStory Women's Conference 2024?
Well, if I can steal your phrase, it's my favorite women's conference I go to every year. So I am looking forward, because there are some really great connections that happen every year. And to get to be a part of what God is doing in people's lives, and I make that point very clearly, because it's not us, it's not even GraceStory doing this thing, it's us partnering with what God is already doing in their lives and being one more touch point on their journey of restoration. So yes, those 2 days can have a lot of energy output, but there's also, it can be very restorative, very rejuvenating, because anytime that you get to join with what God is doing there, it is pretty amazing. So I'm looking forward to that part of it. Personally, where I work, the Counseling Alliance often has a pretty big representation there. So I get to hang out with my colleagues, and we get to do something collectively. A lot of times it's just in our offices doing individual work, but this is a really cool feel for me personally. I get to join with my colleagues and a lot of those conversations that happen, and we all have a common faith bond, and so getting to kind of engage in ministry outside of the walls of our typical office is a pretty cool opportunity as well.
Yeah, there's going to be a whole session where Counseling Alliance is pretty much, I think it's fair to say, taking over, and we'll have something special at this year's conference. Which is why it's just bittersweet. Yes, after, being a part of the board and talking through what 2025 is going to look like, it's kind of like, oh yeah, but we don't get to go to conference. And you may feel that too. So if you're a lady and you're out there listening this year, get to conference, first weekend of November this year, coming up quick too.
10 weeks. We are 10 weeks from the time of this recording until the start of conference. So
yeah, coming up quick. And so with this, how are you, Amber, going to keep, you mentioned emails and things like that. How are you going to keep everybody updated throughout 2025 with what's going on with GraceStory?
Yeah, in a general sense, email is the best place. So if you're not a part of our, I know subscriber sounds like just the worst word ever, because we all have way too many emails and we'd like less of them as it is. But we do try our very best to keep that to a limited few of just staying connected, making sure you have the pertinent information you need. So head over to our website, get yourself subscribed over there so that you really do get what you need to know from us on that. So that's the general sense. Over at my own page on Instagram, for those of you who want a little bit more and enjoy the relatability of having a friend on the journey, that's where I have started doing a little more writing again, sharing my own process, some of my journals, some of my things that God is teaching me in real time. So that's over at Instagram at My GraceStory. You can follow any of our social media, but those are a couple ways to stay a little more closely connected. And then one of the things that before we move too far off of November, one of the things that our team wanted to do is be able to we know that there are some folks who have followed GraceStory and you've considered coming. We know it is a budget item for you. And one of the things that we have done, we've had a sponsor who has helped us out this year with a significant financial gift. And so what we've done is from now until conference start on November 1st, we have actually set our normal cost for a ticket to conference is $249, and it has been lowered to $179. And there isn't a promo code you need. That ticket cost has just been adjusted. So go over there, get registered. We have hoped that by lowering that would eliminate some of the barriers for a few of you who would like to come and haven't been able to. This is going to be a really special year, and we want to make sure that you get a chance to be a part of it.
In the few minutes that we have left of this particular episode, I don't know if it's an infomercial or whatever it is exactly, but definitely information getting out to people, which I like. First, if there's anything we missed that you want to make sure that you hit on, please do. But Amber, what are maybe your hopes and dreams for the future of GraceStory as it kind of embarks in the same mission, but a different direction for GraceStory?
As I knew that we were going to be looking at some pivot days, one of my constant questions with God was, what is that one thing that we can't not do? And over it came back to, I need you to connect with people. And we must provide this accessible mental health resources, because not everybody, no matter how much we encourage people to, just make margin in your budget, take $150 off of your current grocery budget and, go to an hour of counseling. It just isn't even possible or realistic for some of our community members. And we understand that. However, when I started GraceStory in 2019, the goal was, there was this understanding, there are more people like myself who don't know where to start and don't know if this is really going to work. And so we're just continuing that same message of showing up, walking with folks and telling you, you know what, it is worth it. But we also know that sometimes we have to bring the resources to you. And I think that that's what Jesus lived out when he was here. And he met people where they were. And GraceStory is about practical discipleship. That's why we talk about the whole person: mental, physical, emotional, spiritual well-being. And Jesus addressed all of those things. So this is practical gospel We're just reintroducing Jesus in a way that is the simplicity and the awesomeness, the awe-inspiring grace of God, who comes and leans into where we are and invites us to more. So that's what we're doing moving forward. We're just going to find those practical ways where we can do that better, where we continue to serve in the ways we have, but maybe even do those better. So it involves change. Change can be hard, but change can sure be good.
Yeah, you mentioned the whole person and all those different facets of it. And it's really the people that are involved with Grace Story, are the target audience. We've talked about it, is people just recognizing there's a need for change in their life in one of those facets or multiple parts of that whole person, looking for healing and maybe not knowing where to start. But Grace Story gives community, connection, and direction. So I think that's all the time we have for today. That's certainly not the end of what we're going to share. It's not the end of Grace Story. It's not the end of anything, but more of just another stepping stone. So thank you, Amber. Thank you, Ryan, for coming on, sharing that, taking your time, and giving a little bit more to the Grace Story community today.
An honor.
It's great. Absolutely. Great to be here.
And thank you to the Grace Story community for listening in. And if you have questions or you have something to add or you want to be involved, Nate at GraceStoryMinistries.com. Send us an email. We'll figure out how to plug you in, or we'll figure out how to get your question answered for you. So send us a message. We're always looking forward to your communication. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, on that app, give us a follow, tap a 5-star rating, and drop a review. If you're listening on Spotify, give us a follow there. Hit the notification bell to never miss an episode. Like I say every time, there is no us without you. So get engaged. Continue on your journey of restoration. We'll see you in 2 weeks for another episode. We'll see you at conference. So get online, get your registration squared away. Take advantage of that price that the Grace Story community has been set up with to make sure you get there. We'll see you in 2 weeks for a new episode. Until then, we'll be praying for you.